Hi guys, welcome back. It's me, Lucian again. And nowadays, well, as a black person, as a black trans person, I occupy lots of spaces as a black trans person that passes. I hear a lot of conversations that are not necessarily meant for me to hear, but they are meant for me to hear because I'm kind of like a connecting piece, you know. As someone that passes, I can occupy hetero cisgender spaces in a way that lots of LGBTQIA people, black people cannot. Um, so I have like an interesting understanding of all of the different points of concern, uh, the points of inquisitive that may not be expressed properly on both sides. So I've decided to use my platform to try to dispel a bit of the mystery around what it means to be black and to be trans. Um, I did this in a video format, a long video format, so that there wouldn't be a lot of space for argument because this isn't really a space where I want to argue or for or against my humanity or the humanity of others. That's not what this is. I'm a human. I deserve peace just like everyone else. Um, Nobody deserves to be wrongfully persecuted or made to be vilified for an aspect of themselves that is just a part of themselves. It just is, just like I'm black, I'm trans. It's kind of like the same. And I will explain to you in detail how it's the same a little bit later. But I don't think I'm going to do it in a format of telling like comparison. I'm just going to do it in a format of allowing you to critically think, sharing my experience, and hoping that you hear and see some of your story in my story as a black person, as a black cisgender person, or even as a black person who is trans or doesn't know if they're trans or whatever. Just someone who wants to understand. All right, so boom. We'll start with childhood because I'm reading this book by Bell Hooks called Bone Black, where she talks about black girlhood, her girlhood in the memoir. And she makes a good point in saying that, you know, we don't hear a lot about black girlhood, and it's such an expansive experience. The black girlhood experience is not a monolith. A lot of girls experience girlhood very differently. A lot of adults who spend time as a black child, boy or girl, they really experience a different childhood. Um, so yeah, for me in particular, I would say that growing up in predominantly um, black girl spaces, it was a very, for a long time, it was a very ostracizing experience. I remember the first time that I mentioned to someone, I was like, hey, I think, and this is like person to person, because she was telling me, I think we were in like kindergarten, and she was telling me, hey, like, I'm having a sleepover, and she was my friend. And I felt like, well, all the other boys don't get invited to sleepover, so maybe I should like tell her before the sleepover and see what she says. So I told her, I was like, hey, I think I'm a boy in a girl's body. And she was like, oh, well, I don't think any boys are going to be allowed to come to my sleepover. So then at that moment, it was kind of like the first time where I realized that, okay, well, this thing that I'm feeling is not normal. And also, it's not something that is acceptable. I'm not going to be able to have the friends that I want to have, to hang out with people that I want to hang out with, um, if I don't play this kind of role. So my childhood was a lot of performing, but not really performing per se with the knowledge of performance, just performing for the sake of survival, performing for the sake of doing what I needed to do to be able to not be alone, because kids don't really know. I don't know. I guess for me, it was always a game of trying to fit in a certain, as much as possible. But also, I've always had like a very strong spirit. I've always been very strong willed. So I was like, well, there are still certain things that I like that the girls don't like. So I hung out with the boys. I think up until I don't think I know. Up until approximately like seventh grade, eighth grade, I spent the majority of my time with the boys, and I did spend a lot of time in girlhood spaces, but that's only because I wasn't allowed at the boys' sleepovers. I wasn't allowed to. That there was people, adults noticed something different in me, and instead of encouraging my difference or accepting or acknowledging my difference in an affirming way, they kind of spotted my difference and made me aware of my difference, and also pushed me to try to make me like everyone else, which was, I felt like it was stupid. And like, none of that made sense to me. I'm like, bro, like, I don't like this, so why are you making me do this? I don't want to wear a skirt, so why do I have to wear a skirt? It doesn't make sense. And I didn't start questioning those things until I got into like middle school. Like, why do I have to wear this? Why do I have to do that? I also went to a private school, a predominantly black private school. So this wasn't even like white people trying to force any cultural norms on me. It was black people, black women actually, oftentimes trying to make me into what they thought that I should have been, even though, even as children, we know who we are. Like, we're born with the spirit inside of us. We don't really need anyone to shape who we are. We just need people around us to allow us to learn from them the ways of the world around us, the ins and outs of the physical aspect. We don't really need someone to teach us who we are. We know who we are. Now, when it comes to history and things of that sort, as a black American, well, that's culture, and you should learn that regardless. That is something that you have to learn. These are physical things that you have to learn. But things like what you like to wear, what color you want your hair to be, how you want to present yourself, those are things that you know as a child. And a lot of us are taught to unlearn those things as a child, even for black men, which I am now. Even for black men, something that I've noticed, and probably which played a role in the way that I grew up, is that at a very young age, black boys are taught that, they can't do this and you're not supposed to do that. The black childhood is a lot of being told that your comfort doesn't matter, that what you want doesn't matter, that what you feel on the inside doesn't really matter if it goes against what you're being told on the outside, whether that be from a white person, from a black person, from your parents, from your teachers. We are taught to not have boundaries when it comes to our physical beings. We are taught that, we're just objects to be molded and shaped into whatever space that we are being put into, because as a child, you don't really have much say so of the spaces that you're put in. A lot of us don't even get to pick out our own clothes, as kids. And I think that's a freedom that a lot of white kids get. They get to pick out their clothes. They get to do their hair these crazy colors. And not the whiteness is a standard, but there is a difference between our experiences based on the ways that we are raised by our parents, the freedoms that we're allowed to have and not allowed to have. So yeah, that's kind of a pretty good understanding, or a good basic place to start and stop at, of just explaining how certain cultural aspects of Black American culture have affected me as a Black trans man growing up, or even when I was a child, being forced into spaces of girlhood that I didn't quite want to be in. And again, I will say, I knew from a very young age who I was. We all know who we are. It's a matter of, are you strong-willed enough? Are you hard-headed enough to say, no, this is who I am. I know who I am. I know what I feel, and I always have. That's something that a lot of us don't have at a very young age. And I think a lot of that comes from maybe even physically being reprimanded harshly for going against what you're told to abide by. A lot of people are afraid of physical reprimanding. Me, I don't know, I guess it's like autism or something, but that stuff really didn't phase me. It was like, okay, well, you're doing this. It did phase me, but not in the way that they wanted it to. It was more so, you're beating me. Okay, well, what you're beating me for doesn't make sense. So now I'm not learning a lesson of, I shouldn't do this because XYZ, because I know your XYZ doesn't make sense. I'm learning that you do not care about what I think to the point that you think that it's okay to beat me for what I think because I'm so wrong. That's what that feels like to kids. So yeah, um, I guess I'll end this episode of Black Beyond Consumption. I'll probably touch on this topic a little bit more as I read this book more, because it kind of like unlocks memories and ideas that don't really cross my mind much, because I don't really think much about my childhood. It happened. I understand it. And I guess once you get to a space of healing, a lot of times you don't want to go back to those spaces of unhealed thought patterns. But sometimes you have to go back to help other people get out. Kind of like Harriet Tubman. All right. Harriet Tubman's so cool. Okay, I'm out. Peace.